Good evening, everyone. First of all, from Team MahaAP, I welcome respected Nitin Shah sir, Dr. Srinivas Kasi sir, today's guest faculty, Dr. Sanjay Marathe sir, Dr. Rajendra Khadke sir, Dr. Manish Kulkarni ma'am, then today's MMC observer, our mentor, Dr. Sanjay Gosavi sir, and all office bearers of Maharashtra IP branches and all delegates and PG students also. This immunization dialogue is an idea put forth by the President Dr. R.D. sir and very well supported by Sanjay Lalwani sir, Rajendra Khadke sir, and Sanjay Marathe sir. Till now, we have covered almost many interesting topics of vaccinology with a great response to all webinars. And almost all programs lasted for more than 2 hours with active participation from all the delegates across India. Today also we have come up with interesting topic, that is polio vaccines in total. And to discuss all these issues related to it, which we face in our practice, we have these all galaxy of experts. Today's session is allotted 1 MMC credit point by Maharashtra Medical Council, and today's MMC observer is Dr. Sanjay Gosavi. He is senior pediatrician from Nasik. So now I request President RD sir to enlighten more on us about this session and also to introduce Dr. Nitin Shah sir. Over to you, RD sir.
Thank you, Amol. And as you have said, we are already having galaxy of speakers, and our homegrown vaccine experts, Dr. Sanjay Lalwani, Dr. Sanjay Marathe, and Dr. Rajendra Khadke. And these have been instrumental in success of all this immunization dialogue. And MahaIP is really thankful to them in spite of having CCIP module and being very busy. And all of the speakers in last week for 3 days, they have been accepted this, and they have promised me and reassured me that this immunization dialogue of August will not be postponed in September. Thank you all 3 of you for that. We are missing today Dr. Sanjay Lalwani, is another backbone of this immunization dialogue. And friends, I have got this responsibility of introducing Professor Dr. Nitin K. Shah sir. And we will be doing injustice to this program because it had been always crisp and very not lasting very long. But today, this Herculean task of Nitin Shah sir, I will not to introduce him as formally, because it will take a lot of time. But what I have pursued him as, I will like to introduce. And I know Dr. Nitin K. Shah sir is one of the person who I have witnessed with the fastest cerebration. He was the president of CIP in 2006 with president with a difference. He had brought in a specialty series books, and he was editor-in-chief. And I do have got at all those 6 books with me. And those were given by IAP free of charge to all of us. And he has started at that time Ask IAP program. And all national experts in individual different faculties and different chapters. And the consensus statements were given. He had brought many guidelines on iron deficiency, growth monitoring, and all those things. He did not only work for pediatrician, but he had vision for nurses, and refresher modules for nurses were started. And not only for nurses, but for family physicians. And friends, we know that he is an eminent hemato-oncologist. He's been professor at Wadia. He's been attached to so many hospitals, and mainly working for Hinduja Hospital. Not working for, but admitting his patient in Hinduja Hospital. But his profession is hemato-oncologist, but his passion is immunization. And he is an encyclopedia of vaccination and immunization. And he's most forthright, very outspoken, but at the same time, very helpful. I wanted to have his 2-3 slides on a talk on COVID, and he gracefully immediately accepted when I only texted him. And he immediately said, go ahead. He didn't even ask for what you want it or not. And many of us have similar experience of him. So one of the most helpful, and calling spade as a spade, not working, bothering anything, what are the repercussions. And whenever he talks, everybody toes the line, whenever he stands for talking. So we have got such an eminent person today. and I will not be taking much time, but we all ears to listen to Dr. Nitin Shah sir on today's enchanting title, Role of IPV in End Game Program of Polio Eradication or Elimination or End Game Polio. So I invite Dr. Nitin Shah sir for his talk, and after that I request Dr. Sanjay Marathe sir to take the reins as a moderator for panel discussion. And I again welcome Dr. Sanjay Marathe, Dr. Rajendra Khadke, and Dr. Manish Kulkarni to be panelist. And I will like to thank particularly Manish because she had been a rescue, come to our rescue for third panelist as Dr. Sanjay Lalwani sir was traveling. So over to you, Nitin Shah sir.
Thank you, Dr. Patil. सगळे रथी महारथी इथे जमा झालेले आहे. My vaccine guru, as I always say, Dr. Kasi. I am very happy he's also here. Of course, the budding Plotkins of Maharashtra. One is, of course, from Aurangabad. I already said during the IIT module. And now we have Marathi here. Dr. Khadke, of course, is very senior and he's an expert in vaccinology for decades together. So it gives a great honor for me to be presenting this small presentation on polio, especially when so many luminaries are there in the audience. And all the people who have joined late tonight, I thank you for your patient joining. Now let me start sharing my screen. Yes, and I'm sure you are able to see it, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is not the surface of moon as is photographed by the Chandrayaan-3. This is the polio virus, which we all are worried about and what we have gathered here to learn for. So I will be speaking on the injectable polio, the role it had before and after the eradication. And I'm sure eradication is in the sight, but it is still eluding us, eluding us for last several years. So India increased the finish line, inched toward the finish line with a lot of push, and now completes more than 10 years, 12 years. This is, of course, an old slide, being from polio-free from wild polio. Now, interestingly, India is not only free from wild polio for some very peculiar reason, and I think we'll give credit to our immunization program, that we are also free from any vaccine-related poliovirus, except VAP, which will occur because we are still using OPV. But I'm sure the number of VAP cases also will come down as we have introduced IPV more meaningfully. So it was in 2012, that's almost 11 years back, that we were declared polio-free by WHO. Now, why it took so many years, especially UP and Bihar, when the entire part of the country was actually polio-free for more than 20 years, is this reason. So this is the probability of a child who is not immunized getting poliovirus. If that is taken as factor 1 for the odds ratio, then you can see here that as it takes more and more of the trivalent oral polio vaccine, up to 15, his chances of getting wild polio do not become 0. They still remain around 5%. Now, if you had to give 15 doses of trivalent oral polio in a child's life, even if he religiously takes 1 dose every month, it will take 15 months to 2 years of the child's life. And that is exactly what used to happen, that even when heavily immunized children who have taken trivalent oral polio in the past, they used to become victim of paralytic polio. So the paralytic polio, before we eradicated, did not change its epidemiology from shift to the right, which means older children, which normally should have happened, but it continued to happen in younger children, especially younger than 2 years, in spite of having received multiple doses of oral polio vaccine. So that made us think that there is something wrong in the effectiveness of the trivalent oral polio vaccine, especially in Bihar and UP. Now, Bihar and UP have a peculiar situation that time, that they were overpopulated, poor sanitation, dense population, and birth code which was high. So by the time one round of pulse polio is over, the second round happens, there is a sizable number of children who have gathered, who have not been immunized recently during the pulse polio immunization. And if the routine immunization fails for some reason, then these children will accumulate as a potential source for the virus to spread. And that was actually found in our field effectiveness data for both type 1 and type 3 TOPV. And it was shown that again, type 1 and type 3, the effectiveness of 1 dose of TOPV was around 8 to 9% in UP and Bihar. which means you give 100 children 1 dose of TOPV, it will prevent 9 children from getting wild polio. 91 will still not be protected. You give second dose, 9% of the 90%, that is 8 more children will be protected. Like that, you keep on doing till 15 years, as is shown in this graph. You will still reach around 95% community immunity, but not last 5% still can get paralytic polio. That is the reason why you see this 4-year circadian rhythm of the wild polio continue to happen right from 1998 till 2006. And it was either once a P1 or once it was P2. And this story was going on. And 2006, when I was the president, after a lull of 4 years, there was a huge outbreak of almost 700 plus cases of paralytic polio. So it was realized that we cannot fight polio like this by giving any number of doses of TOPV. And by then, the monovalent OPV, by the way, you should know that before TOPV came into market, oral polio vaccine was always given as a monovalent OPV. So first time the child is MOPV1, then MOPV2, then MOPV3, and he would be immunized against all the three. But make their life simple, they made into a trivalent vaccine. So they realized that trivalent vaccine is somehow not able to finish the last tail of UP and Bihar. So they introduced MOPV1 2005. You can see there was a huge outbreak of P1. And with the result, you can see P1 went away, but then the P2 picked up. So when P2 picked up, there was a problem that P1 is taking a backseat, but the P2 is consistently back-to-back 3 outbreaks, 2007, 8, and 9, either in UP or in Bihar. So then it was realized that you have to have a bivalent OPV. So then a BOPV 1 and 3 came in 2010, and then rest is a history. Both type 1 and type 3 started disappearing. By 2010, we were very few cases, 11 only 1, and subsequently since 11, there are no cases, and that's how we are certified in 2014 being polio-free. Now, besides the poor effectiveness of oral polio vaccine, there were other problems that we had to switch from trivalent to bivalent under a very meaningful IPV in a campaign mode in children below the age of 5 years, if possible 2 doses or at least 1 dose. Now that did not happen as effectively as it should have happened in many parts of the world, including in India. So there was suboptimal IPV coverage before a switch from TOPV to BOPV happened. Now, why this was required? Because when you switch from TOPV to BOPV, the type 2 disappears. And the type 2 disappears, any immunity for the children who are born after the switch will be only again type 1 and type 3 unless they use IPV. And that time IPV was still not introduced in the routine immunization program. So you had to boost up the type 2 immunity by giving 1 or 2 rounds of IPV and then switch over from TOPV to BOPV in a synchronized manner all over the world. So while that IPV campaign mode did not happen that greatly, nonetheless, between April and May 2016, 155 countries switched from TOPV to BOPV as was planned. With the result, what happened that we started realizing that when you continue to use oral polio vaccine without too many IPV doses, then there are going to be additional problems. And 2 important additional problems are, one, in a recipient, it can lead to paralysis, what we call VAP or vaccine-associated paralytic polio. It may not be only in the recipient, but also the polio vaccine virus may be transmitted from the recipient to the contact and can lead to polio, paralytic polio in that contact, what is known as contact VAP. But more important than VAP was the CVDPV. Till 2000, no one knew what is CVDPV. CVDPV is a circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. I call them circulating vaccine-derived wild-like polio virus because these viruses which have taken origin from the vaccine virus have mutated either in the environment or in the gut of children with suboptimal immunity and have got neurovirulence back. And not only neurovirulence back, so it can lead to paralysis, but also develop a propensity to circulate in the surrounding area, leading to outbreak. So like wild polio, it leads to paralysis, and it also leads to circulation in the outbreak. And that is why it really threatened to undo what we had done so far in the world. So not only circulating vaccine-derived polio virus, but even an immunocompromised host. And there are many of B-cell deficiency children who are kept alive by IVIG. They will give shelter to this virus and the virus will not disappear. In fact, wild and vaccine-derived polio virus have been found to be excreted in the stools of immunodeficiency children for as much as 1 to 10 years. So this was the problem with the continuing use of OPV, VAP, as well as VDPV. So talking about the VAP, these are the probable cases of VAP that happened world over. Way back before we were using IPV, as several countries were using only OPV. So there used to be around 250 to 500, around 400 cases of VAP, of which, if you look at India, and this is a published data from India, first they only published data on VAP cases from 1998 till 2006, and you can see roughly around 50 to 60 cases of VAP used to happen, and at least another 120 cases of contact VAP, which of course we don't count. Even if you take only the direct recipient VAP, there used to be around 50 to 60 cases of VAP. Now, if you look at this VDPV, once considered as weak cousins of wild poliovirus, we now know the vaccine-derived poliovirus has created havoc, as there are thousands of cases of CVDPV paralysis and outbreaks happening in countries after countries, especially in countries which are free from wild polio for last more than 2 decades. So this is the global polio eradication initiative strategy for the next 4 years, 2022 to 2026. So the goal one is to stop the wild polio virus transmission. And unfortunately, we still have Afghanistan and Pakistan reporting cases. So we were supposed to have the last case of wild polio. Wild polio 2 is out, wild polio 3 also is out. So only wild polio 1 remains. And the WP1 supposed to be the last case somewhere in the end of 2023. That's very unlikely to happen. But if that had to happen, then after 3 years in 2026, you will certify world as free from wild virus 1. At the same time, you have a CVDP outbreak, and to control a CVDP outbreak, say type 2, you use monovalent OPV type 2. And when you use monovalent OPV type 2, it adds fuel to the fire because it has chance of mutation and leading to further CVDP outbreak. So that's why the novel OPVT, and we can discuss in the question answer, was invented and used widely, and that has helped us to curtail a lot of CVDPV cases. But yet, we were supposed to have the last CVDPV case again in 2023, and that does not happen, and maybe validate that absence of CVDP type 2 by 2026. Now, these are goals which I'm sure we are not going to be able to achieve. Why? Because this is the story of wild virus. 2023, you can see there are 7 cases of wild polio, 5 in Afghanistan and 2 in Pakistan. And the same 2 countries which are endemic, you can see here from 17 to 23, last 6 years, they have always reported some or other cases of wild polio. More than that is the story of the CVDP outbreak. So you can see here during COVID time, because of suboptimal vaccination of children, there was a surge in the type 2 cases from 300 cases to 1,000 plus cases. And even type 1, which is in the blue bar, continues to happen 27, 15, and a lot of cases last year, 189. And even in this year, as on today, we have 142 cases of type 2 and 64 cases of type 1 CVDPV. So with the increase in CVDPV, it is threatening for the polio eradication. As you know, polio eradication now is no paralytic polio, whether wild virus or vaccine-derived virus. So VAP has to go, VDPV has to go, and the wild virus has to go. Then you can say that the world is polio-free. Now the question is, will IPV deliver if OPV is having this problem in the last end game? So these are the very original studies done by Dr. Jacobson's group and it's published in 2004. We are talking about 20 years back, where he that time after that was the standalone what do you call the classical IPV or the CIPV, which is not the enhanced IPV that we use today. All our IPV is enhanced potency. This was the old classical IPV which was used. So he did a trial in Mysore where he took 2-month-old children and gave them either 3 doses, 4 weeks interval of either OPV or IPV, around small number, 50 children, and he studied the seroconversion. And he found that the seroconversion with type with OPV was around 85, 89, and 55 against type 1, 2, 3, giving an average of 76. Whereas those children who received IPV, it was 98, 98, and 96, giving an average of 97%. So he showed that not only the seroconversion was much better with 3 doses of IPV than OPV, but look at the titers. The titers are high and sustained in most of the children who have received IPV, which is seen with this round, these circles on the top. Whereas with the OPV, you can see the dotted line, the titers used to fall. So there were very few achieved very high titers compared to children who received IPV who achieved a very high titer against all the 3, type 1, type 2, type 3. Then he did a field effectiveness, and there are 2 or 3 studies. One he did was in 1980 to 83, 2 rural communities with 50,000 population chose to give infant DTP IPV or only DTP. There was no OPV that time, and he showed that the DTP IPV cohort had 0 case of wild polio, whereas that only DTP case had 17 cases for 3,104 children. So vaccine effectiveness was 100%. Next, he induced Dr. Renu Patel, who was working in JJ Hospital that time and was also working in the slums of Dharavi, to say that along with Dr. Meenakshi Mehta, that you give IPV to, because they were also frustrated by having paralytic polio in children who have received oral polio vaccine. So it was realized then that probably OPV is not working as well as we should. So what they did was they took one block, ICDS block, almost 100,000 population, and gave children only IPV. There occurred no case of polio. Then next year they took one more block. So the first block continued to receive IPV and one more block took IPV. In both the blocks, there was no case of polio. In the third year, they added one more block. So now 3 blocks. First block receiving 3 years, second block receiving 2 years, third block receiving since 1 year IPV, and no case in these 3 groups. So it was proven that even in the worst of the worst scenario, like in slums, IPV will work where OPV has not worked. And that ultimately led to an ICMR induced huge study in the North Arcot district in Tamil Nadu, where 5 million population is there between 87 to 92. There they received the enhanced IPV. So DTAP IPV at 2, 4, and 9 month schedule, and OPV also in the control group. And they found that the OPV group, the cases dropped from 9 to 0.4 at 95% coverage per 100,000 population, whereas in eIPV, the case dropped from 14 to 0.3 with coverage of only 84%. So even with lesser coverage of IPV, there was more impact on the disease burden in the group, in the area where IPV was given as compared to OPV. This is the only data that we have, because the ICMR had prohibited publishing the data because they were not wanting to go against the official policy of OPV that time. Now coming to IPV in the NIP in India. We knew from 3 studies. One was Cote d'Ivoire, other was Gambia, and third was Oman, where children who had received previously OPV were randomized to receive either one more dose of OPV at 6 months or at 9 months in Cote d'Ivoire, at 6 to 9 months in Gambia, or 9 months in Oman, or an IPV dose again at the same time. So it was OPV versus IPV. And they found a seroprevalence at the end of this extra dose. And you can see here in the OPV dose, you can see here the seroconversion from 73 became only 76. Whereas in the IPV group, the seroconversion jumped to 94% or even 97% when it was given late at 9 months. So the community immunity gap, which was there in OPV group, was blocked by just one extra dose of IPV at 6 to 9 months to the tune of 80%. So that opened an idea that can you continue to use OPV, but give an IPV dose so that you can boost up and community immunity can be built up so that the polio eradication can come inside and can remain as it is. So that's how you see one dose of IPV was included at 14 weeks in the first decision taken in the for using IPV in the NIP after the switch from TOPV to BOPV happened. But very soon it was realized that when you give one dose of IPV, either at 2 months or at 6 weeks like in Cuba or at 4 months like in Cuba, your type 2, which you are interested because type 2 is not there in the OPV, you can see here the seroconversion is only 35, 38, 39, 63 at the most. So it is not enough. So one dose of IM-IPV at 14 weeks is not a good idea. So what do? You cannot afford to give them 3 primary, 2 booster as we are doing in our private practice. So that's where the fractional dose of IPV came for the first time. And before this decision, in 2010 itself, Oman had done a study where they gave children either 0.1 ml of IPV intradermally or 0.5 ml IPV intramuscularly in 2-4-6 month schedule, and they looked at the neutralizing antibody titers against all the 3 types at the end of the schedule. And what they found, seroconversion with intradermal, which is pink, and intramuscular, which is green, is almost the same against type 1, type 2, type 3, but the titers are definitely less than 50% or even 1/3 with intradermal route as compared to intramuscular. Now, if you can achieve a very high seroconversion, probably it is helpful in short term. In long term, whether titers matter or no, we can discuss it during the question answer. So then came a quick study in Moradabad in India, where a similar experience was done, that children who had received plenty of MOPV1 and TOPV in the past, who were 6 to 9 months old, they either were given 1 dose of MOPV1 standard dose or MOPV1 with high dose, or a fractional dose, or a full dose intramuscular of GSK, or a full dose intramuscular of Panacea. So you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. And you can see here seroconvergence. This is type 1, this is type 2, this is type 3. No matter what you did, you can see seroconversion achieved in almost 100% against type 1, though 73 to 74% with the MOPV. So that means it did not work well. But if you look at the IPV, then you can see it became 99 to 100%. And again, type 3, same thing. The MOPV did not do as well. Fractional dose did little better than MOPV, 70%. But again, you can see IMIP was the best, giving 95% result. So we learned that in India also, if you give a fractional dose of IPV, it works better than just giving them MOPV1. So then there was another study done in Cuba, where 310 seronegative infants in 2009 were randomized to receive intradermal versus intramuscular 2 doses. Now that was 1 dose in Moradabad. This was 2 doses at 4 months and 8 months. So we are coming closer and closer to what we are using now. And they looked at the seroconversion after the first dose at 4 months and after the second dose at 9 months. That is 1 month after the second dose. And you can see here after the first dose, the IM seemed to be doing much better than intradermal. But you can see after the second dose, the seroconversion between intradermal and intramuscular for type 1, type 2, type 3 was almost the same, more than 90% with intradermal and nearly 100% with intramuscular. And they looked at the priming, and you can see here, those who had received intradermal also were primed well to the tune of 90% to respond to the subsequent dose. And that's why you can see it jump from 16% to 94%, from 46% to 100%. So we knew if you give 2 doses of fractional dose, but given at 4 months and 8 months, they will be sufficient. Now that made us change. Now you can't use 4 months and 8 months because children are not going to come at 4 months and 8 months. To sync with the EPI schedule, now instead of 1 IM dose, 2 intradermal dose would be introduced. And before that, they want to compare what happens with 2 intradermal doses, 6 weeks and 14 weeks. So you can see here, the intradermal route given at 6 and 14 weeks in Bangladesh showed that the seroconversion against type 2 is 81%, much better than what you see with 1 dose of intramuscular at 14 weeks. And even in India, a study showed at 6 and 14, type 2 intradermal seroconversion will be 89%, much better than what you happen with 1 dose given at intramuscular. Now that made the change of switching from 1 dose at 14 weeks of IMIPV to 2 fractional dose at 6 weeks and 14 weeks. But when you do this 6 weeks and 14 weeks, what we had seen, that the seroconversion at the best 80 to 82%. So it is risk mitigation and not risk avoidance. If you want to completely avoid the risk of any type 2 CVD-PV or wild disease should it come back, then you need better than 2 fractional dose. And that's why the 3rd dose of fractional IPV was introduced at 9 months from January 1st this year. And that was based on 2 studies. This is a study done in Panama by Dr. Bandopadhyay's group, who is from WHO. So they took 4 groups. One group received 3 IM IPV at 10, 14, and 36 weeks. One group received 2 IM IPV at 14 and 36 weeks. One group received 3 fractional doses of IPV at 10, 14, and 36 weeks. And one group received 2 FIPV at 14 and 36 weeks. And what they found was that if you gave 3 IPV at 10, 14, 36, the seroconversion against type 1, type 2, type 3 was nearly 99, 194. And even with 2 fractional doses at 14 and 36 weeks, it was similar at 96, 98, 85. So if you give a late dose at around 36 weeks, then even if you are given 2 doses previously, you can achieve more than 90% seroconversion against type 1, type 2, type 3, especially type 2, because type 1 and type 3 anyway are going to be taken care by additional dose of DOPV, which is continued. And second study done in Bangladesh actually looked at similar type of 4 arms. Forget the 4 arm, look at the arm on arm D. Arm D received fractional dose of IPV at 6 weeks and 14 weeks, and a booster of IPV at 24 weeks, that is 6 months. Now we are giving at 9 months, which is even later, so it's going to be having even more boosting. But you can see here, seroconversion in this group with the third dose, at the end of third dose, was 98% at type 1, 96% type 2, 99% at type 3. So what could not be achieved by just 2 fractional doses, 6 and 14, can be achieved by adding third dose given at 6 months to 9 months. And because we give measles at 9 months, we chose to give the third dose at 9 months. And you can see the titers. Again, the titers are lower even when you give 3 IPV, 3 fractional dose IPV. You can see the titers are 288 compared to 3 IPV, which are more than 1400, again type 1, 181, 1100 type 2, 455, more than 1400 type 3. So while you achieve a good seroconversion with 3 fractional dose, your titers are still lower than the full IM dose. So what should we do in our practice? So in our practice, we are answerable to the patient, not only for short term, but for long term, not only for seroconversion, but even for the titers. So we knew that when you use IPV full dose intramuscularly, there are more than 54 trials on thousands of children using 2 4-month schedule, 2 4 6 3 dose, 2 3 4, 3 4 5, 2 4 12, etc. And you can see the seroconversion nearly 100% against all the type 1, type 2, type 3. And similarly, if you use 6, 10, and 14 weeks, which is the EPI schedule, South Africa study, Philippines study in India, all have shown again that you achieve more than 100% seroconversion with good titers at the end of the third dose. And of course, we follow them up in our practice with a booster in the second year and a booster at the fifth year. And look at the seroconversion. This is a South African study. Post booster, you can see here, the seroconversion becomes 100% against all the type 3. So booster is very important. And not only that, even the titers jump very high with the boosters being given in the first year and second year and subsequently at the 5 years. Now, why has the IAP, ACVIP introduced or recommended using IPV also in the second booster? Now, that's because of this reason, that when you give either an AP-based vaccination or an AP-based vaccination, then post-toddler dose, that is, you have the first booster, the titers are very high. And you can see the seroconversion also is 100%. But before the booster at 5 years, the seroconversion drops to 94 against type 1, 96 in type 2, and 96 in type 3. But the titers really drop to very low level of 57, 77, 123. When you give them the IPV booster at 5 years, when you give them the IPV booster at 5 years, not only seroconversion is 100, 100, and 100 against all the 3 types, but titers are even higher than what was there post booster 1. So post booster 2, the titers are really very high. Do titers matter? Maybe they matter for long-term immunity, not to prevent wild polio, but to prevent circulation of the transmission of the virus, either vaccine-derived or wild virus, should it come in our country. Mucosal immunity is much higher if you have higher titer as compared to if you have a lower titers. And not only AP-based, even WP-based vaccine, the same thing happens. The seroconversion drops before 5 years booster. Titers are very low. And when you give them the 5-year booster, seroconversion is back to 100%. And titers are very high. And that's the reason why we should give IPV also at the 5 years, because that's also the last recommended age and licensed age for using IPV in our country. You know, it's around 5 years in our country. Now, many of the question is, are that children receive OPV also, they use fractional IPV, will it prevent any VAP cases? So this is a study done in Hungary where they use no vaccination and they used to have around 4 to 5 cases of VAP every year. In 91, they switched to single dose of IPV at 3 months before any OPV. And you can see the VAP cases disappeared. And later on, they had only IPV schedule and the VAP continued to remain low. So even if someone has taken 1 dose of IPV, then subsequent any number of OPV doses is not going to lead to any VAP cases, is what this trial from Hungary shows us. Now, just 2 myths before I close and go to the question answer. The myth number 1 is IPV does not lead to mucosal immunity. I think that is not completely true. This was a trial done where controls were not given any vaccine, children who had given bivalent OPV, and children who had been given IPV. 28 days after that, so children had, this was a study done on excretion of oral polio type 1 at day 3, day 7, and day 14 after a bivalent OPV challenge. at 20 days after IPV OPV control. So children have received previous vaccination at least 20 days before this challenge, and after 3rd day, 7 and 14 days of the challenge with OPV1, these 3 groups were studied for the excretion, and you can see here the least excretion was in the blue bar, which is the IPV group, as compared to green bar, which is bivalent OPV group. No matter whether you took it 7 days, 14 days, or overall. Same when they were challenged with OPV3, again the same thing. The least secretion was with the in the blue bar, which IPV bar, as compared to the green bar, which is bivalent, and control at the highest. So IPV does lead to mucosal immunity and does not allow the excretion of the virus to continue for very long. The second myth is that IPV does not lead to herd immunity. Now that is a complete myth. Between 58 to 61, this is the number of cases of polio in USA. So these are the observed cases in the pre-vaccine era. Around 24 cases per 1,000 was the incidence of wild polio in USA before any vaccination. Now, this was what was expected if there was no IPV, that the cases will little go up because of the increased population. So by 61, you will have around 28 per 1,000 population. Now, if IPV did not have any herd effect and the type of coverage of IPV that was there in those initial years, you would have expected a drop to happen from 27 to 12, say in 58, and like that in 61 from 28 to 6.5. Whereas actual cases happened were 4, 6, 2.5, and 1 per 1,000. So this additional benefit from 6.5 expected to actual 1 happening is because of the herd effect seen when there was a meaningful coverage of only 60% with IPV in United States that time. So that even a killed vaccine can lead to herd effect. We know now from pneumococcal disease very well. Same thing will happen with also IPV. Now, the last part, IPV for adolescent and adults. It's not licensed in our country, but this is what a funny side in 2006 when I was the president. Namibia had an outbreak of polio, wild polio 1. I think 60 cases and another 70 probable cases, and all in 100% of them were in adults. So you can see between May, October 2006, there were almost 19 confirmed cases and another 66 unspecified cases, all of them in adult above 14 years, making the entire population undergo a pulse polio campaign, including children and adults. And after that, in 2010, there was an outbreak of wild polio in Tajikistan, which was origin from India, and where you can see more than 400 cases of wild polio happen. And again, if you see 6% of them were in adults above the age of 14 years. So adult polio is something which is not rare, and there have been reports from many other countries also previously of adult polio. And that is why you see many European countries, except US and Australia, many other European countries have an IPV in the 2nd decade of life. So they have 3 primary, first booster, second booster, and another IPV in the 2nd decade of life, either as IPV standalone, but mainly as a Tdap IPV, which is available in these countries. You can see so many countries have IPV in the 2nd decade. So friend, this is a ghastly sight which I have seen as resident. I'm sure many of you who are seniors would have seen deadly polio virus paralysis, and very pathetic to see children who are as bright as you and me, but having President Roosevelt used to say, the lame paralysis of children or infants. That is something which should not happen to any child, especially when you have not 1 but 2 good vaccines in the form of OPV and IPV to fight this dreaded disease. So give other children the vaccine that you will give to your own children or grandchildren. And I think if you are going to give your children IPV alone or IPV, then I think we should be consciously promoting IPV, and not just because IPV, OPV is part of national program, etc. For one, it's okay, but I think we should be very truthful to our patient to give them what is best and what is most safe. And there's no doubt that IPV is much better and much safer vaccine than OPV. Well, thank you very much for your patient hearing. I'll stop sharing and we can hand over the mic to the moderator for the question answer.
Excellent presentation, sir, as always.
Thank you, sir.
We are impressed.
What a presentation. I thought I have taken out few questions which will be difficult for the people. Then after listening to Shah's talk, I think those questions have become very, very ordinary for us.
No, not at all.
And what a convincing talk with giving so many references and studies and all that, he is just a boss in the vaccinology. And if you listen to him, I think there are no queries left in your mind.
So what
Thank
I
you.
thought was that, during immunization dialogue, we take a lot of day-to-day questions that child has
Absolutely.
come like this, what do we do, etc. But I thought the science behind, the studies
Absolutely.
behind are so elaborate and so well thought of. Is something which a pediatrician should be at least exposed to, so that he understand why we give that one-line answer. For that, there is one study which we have studied and read and thing like that. So I'm sure in the question answer we can take the common scenarios and solve the problems of day-to-day life.
Absolutely. With this, I will share my screen.
Sir.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mahapi, for the opportunity. And I'm so fortunate to be a moderator when a very elite panel is there. And after listening to Dr. Nitin Shah's highly explanatory and full of studies and all that, I think those who have attended the talk, most of the queries which we are going to discuss has already been solved. I'm very lucky to have three panelists who are all three are stars in the field of vaccinology. Dr. Manish and not Dr. Manisha. So do not call her Manisha. She is a rising star in the field of vaccinology, and she's already a leading rheumatologist practicing in Aurangabad. I don't think Dr. Khadke needs any introduction. A very senior person, passionate about his interest in vaccinology, and an ACVIP member from West Zone. And what to say about Dr. Nitin Shah, sir? I can say only he's a boss. and he has already said oncology is profession and vaccinology is passion. And he's so passionate about this subject. And I think he's the most updated person I have seen. I think he must be knowing the studies going on in the month of August also. So he is a reference book for all of us. I am equally fortunate to have Dr. Kasi sir with us, who has taught us vaccinology. Dr. Shah sir has taught us vaccinology, and we have become students of vaccinology because of few people, and two of them are definitely Dr. Kasi sir and Dr. Nitin Shah sir. As we know that this panel discussion is basically for those practicing pediatricians. You will find some questions which are more important to them because they are practicing, and sir has already given us information about what is happening and with what is the science with OPV and IPV. Suppose we go and we see the journey of OPV and IPV. When we started our practice, it was only OPV. But if I go a little back, in 1955, the first vaccine which was introduced was IPV by SAC. And with the huge success, everyone was so happy that IPV has come to save all the patients and all that. Unfortunately, Qatar incident happened, and that while preparing the IPV, it got contaminated with wild polio, and there were so many deaths. Then 1960, oral polio was introduced by SEBIN, massive trial of 15 million kids, and it has become an instant success in the field of vaccinology as far as the polio is concerned. Lot of advantages we are going to discuss. And also there was a theory of contact immunization. Unfortunately, I think it has not been proved subsequently. And OPV was introduced, IPV production was stopped, and I think for next 35 years, we were using OPV and OPV, as Dr. Nitin Shah sir has rightly said, initially monovalent OPV, then bivalent OPV, and ultimately trivalent OPV. And 35 years we used trivalent OPV, and it has done a marvelous job by eradicating polio from, I think, 98% of the world, leaving behind Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I think 4 or 5 years back, Nigeria. So it has done a great job. But one thing happened in 2000, in January, the first case of VAP was identified. And Americans were intelligent enough, they immediately switched to all IPV schedules, thinking that this OPV is going to give us a lot of problems, and they have already eradicated polio long back. So they were intelligent enough. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative was introduced in 1988 with the WHO, and all the countries joined it. Till 2016, we continued to use a trivalent OPV when the world realized that this is the point where we have eradicated polio from everywhere, but then that is not the end of the polio. And they introduced endgame polio program in 2016. And we started using IPV along with OPV. And there was a switch from trivalent, we switched to bivalent because there was not a single case after 1999. Our aim was to ultimately seize the use of OPV, which is having two major problems, VAP and VDPV. So if you can take care of VAP, VDPV along with wild polio virus, as Dr. Nitin Shah sir has already said, maybe in 2026, the world will be declared as polio free. With this optimism and little about the historical aspect, let us go and discuss few cases. The first question for the Dr. Manish: what schedules are recommended by ACVIP and in NIP for OPV and IPV? That will be our base on which we'll be discussing the questions.
ACPIP recommendation uses zero-dose polio vaccine, oral polio vaccine, which is same as in the NIP, but along with it, that 6 weeks, 10 weeks, and 14 weeks, we are using only injectable polio vaccine. Then there is a booster at 18 months and another second booster at the age of 4 to 6 years. What National Immunization Program recommends is zero-dose oral polio vaccine is given, and then at 6 weeks, we are using fractional IPV along with the OPV. At 10 weeks, we are using only OPV. At 14 weeks, the fractional IPV and OPV. Now we have come up with a booster at 9 months with fractional IPV. 18 months, there is only OPV, and 5 years, there is no OPV booster.
So basically speaking, we are in private practice, we are using zero polio followed by all IPV doses. And in government setup, we are using OPV, zero OPV, then all OPV for 6 and 14, plus 3 doses of fractional doses on 6 weeks, 14 weeks, and 9 months. Then they are giving one OPV booster at 18 months, but no booster at 5 years. Can you discuss, Dr. Khadke, can you discuss different schedules and which is the best schedule which you feel?
See, basically the Western world is using 2, 4, and 6 as primary IPV vaccination. And that is better than what we are using at 1.5 months, 2.5 months, and 3.5 months. But for all problematic problems, we are using the IPV in our schedule as 3 doses at 1.5 months, 2.5 months, and 3.5 months, and a 4 doses booster as 18 months and 4 to 6 years. So these 5 doses of IPV are given in private practice, while in as Manish has already said that basically up to the age of 18 months, National Immunization Program has an oral polio, and IPV is given only 2 doses at 6 weeks and 14 weeks. So the better dose would be 2, 4, 6 months, but we have our own reasons to match it with the other vaccination. So we give it at 6, 10, and 14 weeks.
So even it was uncompromised, that was preferred in our country because we have to have early protection because so many cases and transmission was a big risk.
So I just one
Yeah,
Sanjay.
yeah,
I
yes,
think
yes.
the pediatrician should understand what is the confusion: 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks.
Yeah.
That there are transplacental maternal antibody against type 1, type 2, type 3, as also against so many other diseases which are vaccine preventable, and that prevent uptake of the vaccine virus in the child. So while birth dose is given not for the protection but for priming, the subsequent doses are for actual protection. So if you give them early, there'll be some children who will have strong antibodies from mother because the mothers are very robust and well nourished. They will not do as well when you start at 6 weeks. So ideally, only 2 doses of intramuscular IPV are enough, provided you give them after the transplacental maternal antibodies have disappeared. So that happens usually by 8 weeks. And that's why if you start at 8 weeks, and you keep an interval of 8 weeks. So you give it 8 weeks and then 16 weeks, 2 doses. This is as good as giving 3 doses, 16 and 14. But because no, you cannot bring children at odd time the way you want, because there are also other vaccines like Rota, Pneumo, and the pentavalent. So to sync it with this schedule is followed. But ideally, if suppose someone could not afford in the past and wanted only less doses of IPV, you could have given 2 doses at 8 weeks and 16 weeks or thereafter, keeping 2 months gap, and that will lead to 100% seroconversion against all the 3 types.
So it is basically a programmatic.
Absolutely.
What suits you
Yes,
the
sir.
best for your country, we should follow. So even
Yes.
2 weeks, dose schedule of 8 weeks and 16 weeks is equally good.
Yes.
What are the factors, Dr. Khadke, on which the immune response of the IPV is based on?
See the
The seroconversion.
immune response, that is seroconversion, depends upon at the age of vaccination. If you have early age of vaccination, basically the maternal antibodies are going to interfere and cause a difference. So age is very important. Secondly, what is the immune status of a person who is receiving that IPV? If he is immunodeficient, then probably he would not power those antibodies which are supposed to be powered by a injectable polio vaccine at 6 weeks, 14 weeks, and this thing. So these are the two important aspects of IPV.
Even the spacing will make a difference.
Interval,
If you have a
interval
spacing,
Interval
that is spacing between the schedule will also make a difference.
Yeah,
Yes.
and one more I
And-
would add that in past, the Western manufacturer tried to make an IPV with WP based combination and they failed because they somehow could not prevent. I mean, the seroconversion against IPV was poor when it was mixed in the same syringe with WP based DPT. So they used to have a dual chamber syringe whereby IPV is one chamber, DPT and other vaccine is other chamber. And when you vaccinate, both go at the same time through the same needle in the child's muscle. Our vaccine manufacturer, both the Panacea and now Serum, have actually overcome this. And now we have a wholesale-based hexavalent vaccine. So I think that's a credit to our manufacturer that they are able to circumvent this problem of using IPV in the same syringe along with DPT.
Dr. Manish, can you explain what is CIPV, EIPV, and SIVP? IPV.
EIPV is conventional IPV, which we are no longer using now. It is by the inactivated wild polio virus. And what we are using now is enhanced IPV, which has got more antigenic load. And SIPV is a Sabin IPV. So the strains in the oral polio vaccine Sabin is used for the IPV production. So it becomes relatively cheaper because it doesn't require the biosafety labs of higher grades, grade 4, which most of the developing countries like ours, we don't have. And so this is already being used in Japan, I think. And at present, we don't have this vaccine, but it will be very useful if we can get this.
Not only safe for production, it is very safe for it will prevent
Research.
the chances of converting into neurovirulence will be very less because it's already an attenuated one which we'll be using. So safety aspect of IPV is also good. Now the question for Dr. Nitin Shah. Sir, I read somewhere that is a cross priming and it is playing an important role in achieving a good antibody titers of IPV even one dose is given at 14 weeks. What is the theory or rationale behind this cross priming?
So see, actually, I mean, if you give an IPV at 14 weeks and then you achieve a good titers, only with one dose, that's not possible. As I showed you, your type 2 is 30% or 40%. But because you subsequently use type 1, type 3 in a BOPV, it keeps on adding boosting effect. So obviously the bird dose also was used from the same point of view, that is priming for the subsequent doses to become better as compared to. So children would not receive bird dose of OPV when they were given 16 and 14, and children were given bird dose and then given 16 and 14. The seroconversion titers were better in children who were primed as compared to not primed. But that's not actually what cross priming is. Original cross priming is a very different concept. And I mean, if people get bored if I tell you, but what is cross priming actually is that the CD8 cytotoxic cell, which are most important for any viral or fungal infection, they will be primed and they will kill the infected cell if they react with the antigen of the infective organism, which is presented to CD8 on its surface through the class 1 MHC molecule. So CD8 class 1 MSC molecule, the antigen is taken by the antigen presenting cell, goes to the T cell, it presents it to the T cell makes an effector T cell, it kills that infected organism containing cell. Now, because viruses do not infect the antigen presenting cell directly, so APC cannot present type 1 through MHC1 to the CD8 type cytotoxic cell. So there may be poor immune response to viruses. Now, to circumvent this, the other antigen, not the antigen presenting cell, not only they don't have a receptor for the say poliovirus, but they can take the antigen of poliovirus from the other lymphoid organism and then get stimulated and then present it to the CD8 cell, and then CD8 cell will go and kill those. So that's the actual concept of cross priming. So we use cross priming as actual priming, but cross priming originally is to circumvent the viruses which do not infect APC, the antigen presenting cell. How do the CD8 cell recognize them is through the concept of cross priming. And cross priming can happen only with killed vaccine, and adjuvanted vaccine like IPV cannot happen with OPV. Or cannot happen with oral vaccine.
What I understood from the cross priming, that theory, that if you give bivalent OPV, there are some antibodies produced against the type 2 also.
That is what.
Suppose if you give IPV, there is a significant increase in the titers against type 2. So
but that has actually not been shown to happen in practical. Because in practical, when you give only BOPV, and then you subsequently give only 1 IM IPV at 14 weeks, is not sufficient. You give 2 fractional doses of IPV at 6 and 14 is not sufficient. So you need to give 3 doses, and 3 IPV anyway leads to 100% seroconversion with or without OPV. So it's in theory it looks fine, but in practical it doesn't happen.
But sir, unless the MSC1 is charged by APC, how the CD8 would go and
correct. So that is the question. So the APC doesn't have, say, receptor for poliovirus. So ideally there should be no CD8 immunity against poliovirus, but that doesn't happen because APC doesn't have receptor. The virus cannot attach directly, but the virus disintegrates into other extra lymphatic tissues and antigens are present in the body. Now the APC recognizes the antigen and not the virus. So it doesn't need to have a receptor for the virus, what I'm trying to say. That is why it's known as cross-priming.
Thank you, sir.
The question for Dr. Khadke, sir.
Yes.
Why 2 doses why the NIP schedule for fractional doses of IPV has changed from 2 doses to 3 doses? And why the government has introduced 3 doses of fractional IPV in their national immunization program? What is the basis which Dr. Nitin Shah sir has already discussed? So for the audience, you can give the explanation.
Sir has already explained that basically 2 fractional IPV will not give you robust immunity, and you require a booster dose, and that booster doses can be given on a fractional IPV on a 9 months. So it is based on the Bangladesh study. From 6 to 9 months, we can give another fractional dose of IPV as a booster dose, which would enhance the antibody titers, and seroconversion would be much better than the only 2 fractional vaccination.
The study which was done in Bangladesh was very, you can say, very surprising also.
Yes.
They had 3 groups: 6 weeks and 9 months, 14 weeks and 9 months, and 6, 14 and 9 months. Surprisingly, those who have received at 6 weeks and 9 months were equally seroconverted as compared to 14 and 9 months.
Yes, sir.
And fortunately, we are already giving 6 and 14, so we only introduced the 3rd dose at 9 months. So with the seroconversion almost crossing 90%, which is minimum what WHO SAGE committee has asked for, and it has given fairly good protection than the previous fractional doses. And fractional doses were given in 2016 because of the acute shortage of IPV. Otherwise, they would have given intramuscular doses of IPV as we have suggested.
So Sanjay, actually, if you look at the Panama study by Bandopadhyay and the Bangladesh study together, Panama study gave the fractional dose booster at 24 weeks. So that's around 6 months. So even that helped. So which means you have to give the last dose much beyond 14 weeks, 15 weeks, 16 weeks, 18 weeks, 24 weeks, whatever. So later you give the 3rd dose, better it is. Especially when you have no wild polio, and in our country, fortunately, no vaccine-derived polio virus. What's the hurry in giving the 3rd dose? So give 3rd dose at 9 months. That's the best. In fact, once you give the 3rd dose at 9 months, is as good as giving 3 primary intramuscular IPV.
So shortage of
Sir.
IPV has been boon for all of developing countries.
They could come out with the new study of 3-dose fraction.
New studies.
We can, Dr. Khadge, we can discuss this so-called shortage maybe in privately, but there is no shortage of IPV.
So the
Shortage is in the
question,
mind of the public and not in the manufacturers who make these vaccines.
sir, the question for Dr. Nitin Shah, sir.
Yes.
Sir, with this 3-dose fractional IPV in NIP, surprisingly, even before in 2-dose schedule, they have never introduced a booster. Even this 3-dose schedule, they have not introduced a booster. What is the
Correct.
reason that we suggest, but they do not?
No, because they continue to give the OPV. So they think that once you achieve more than 98% type 2 seroconversion, then type 1, type 3, which are the problem? Because type 2 wild polio anyway is not existing for years. So we don't need to boost up type 2 again and again. Type 1 and type 3 is boosted by subsequent oral polio at 15 months and pulse polio 2 times in a year for the first 5 years. I think it makes sense that they don't give booster, which is fine. I mean, you can
But then
save on so much of money.
But ACVIP gives 5 years booster only because of the titers are going down. Here
Correct.
they
So
are giving
now,
them-
correct. So whether the titers matter is we don't know. And I think when myself and Dr. Kasi were in one of the conference where Dr. Jacob John was there as recently as 2 months back, we have the same question at why the titers matter when there is no wild polio. And I also felt, Kasi also felt, and Dr. Jacob John also mentioned the same, that when you have low titers, there is low spillage of IgG from serum to mucosa. So you'll have less mucosal immunity. So you may not develop wild polio or vaccine-related polio paralysis, but you will become an unknown, or without your knowledge, you'll become a part of chain of transmission of one of these viruses should it enter in our community. We cannot afford to do that. So we want everyone's gut to have full immunity. And because we are saying no OPV into our children and giving only IPV, except for the pulse polio immunization. So we feel that another IPV at 5 years would boost up the titers so that they will not become part of the chain of transmission. And I strongly believe that for long-term immunity against IPV, you need titers, because there have been cases of adult polio which I surely don't want to get paralyzed at my age.
Sir, but there has been a study for a Kenshi trial.
There are no.
There is a study from Kenshi trial, 3 years follow-up in Kenshi, 15 to 20 years old, showed persistent of vaccine efficacy up to 98%. The paper
Correct.
was presented in 35th IPV conference, which
But
has
that
been
is-
shared by Dr. Kasi only.
But that is 3 to 5 years. If you look at the Portugal and several other countries, including I think Malaysia, they've done a seroprevalence study from 2 months of a child to 60, 70-year-old men. And they found that against type 1, type 2, type 3, at least 15% of adults don't have a recognizable antibody. They may have an amnestic response if they come in contact with, but there is no, so there is loss of seroconversion with the age. I'm not comfortable myself. I mean, what's the harm if I can afford to take another dose? I would even take a Tdap IPV as an adult rather than only Tdap if it's available.
Dr. Nitin Shah, sir, my query is that polio has a very short incubation period. Not like an hepatitis B or hepatitis A. So ultimately, you will have to keep the high titers also if you want to tackle.
No, that's not true. That's not true. Because it's not as short as meningococcal, where before you develop an amnestic response, you will develop disease and die. Polio incubation period is not 24 or 48 hours. It is few days.
Few days.
So
So
it will still
secondary
work.
immune response takes about 9 days to have the
No,
amnestic
you can
response.
have an amnestic response in an injectable poliovirus vaccinity within 2 to 3 days, 40 to 72 hours. So that's not an issue.
Now the question for Dr. Manish. First 2 questions she can answer. Why we as well as government has strongly recommended use of zero polio. And secondly, when it should be given ideally to have the maximum effect.
Ideally, the 0 dose of oral polio vaccine should be given before the initiation of breastfeeding. That is, as soon as the child is stabilized and with the first contact. And the 0 dose polio, as sir has rightly said, is because the priming is required so that the subsequent doses which we give is gives very robust seroconversion. And the risk of VAP with this 0 dose of OPV which we are giving is very less in India because of the high circulating maternal antibodies are there. And also we want to give this 0 dose before the other viruses get localized. So that's why it's given before the.
So before the gut has been introduced with some other organisms, you must give them oral 0 dose of polio. Sir, now my question to Dr. Nitin Shah. Sir, if I am giving 5 doses of injectable polio, do I really need a 0 polio to that child?
Yes, yes, you must give it because zero polio is to prevent colonization of other viruses. Number two, it doesn't lead to any VAP. Third, it leads to priming even for IPV, subsequent IPV. So zero dose oral polio is a national policy and we must adhere
No,
to
no.
it.
Sir, national policy, I do agree.
Yes.
We will continue
No,
just as
in
a science,
addition-
I'm saying.
In addition, it leads to priming even for IPV.
But
Sir,
then
can I-
Americans are not doing it.
No, it doesn't matter. No, everything which
Sir-
we do, they don't do and vice versa.
Sir, can I give IPV at 0 dose as a 0 dose?
No, so Dr. Datta's group tried in Delhi giving IPV at 0 dose. When you give OPV 0 dose, as I said, it doesn't matter because it doesn't lead to zero protection, but it leads to priming. IPV will not work at all because IPV will be completely neutralized by the maternal antibodies. OPV, because it colonizes the mucosa and there is not much antibody at the mucosa level in a newborn, it will allow it to prime the local lymphoid tissue. And then subsequently, there will be better response to OPV and IPV. That's the difference. So IPV giving 0 dose, it will not work.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, these are a couple of real-time situations for the private practitioners. Dr. Khadke, you can take this question.
Yes,
First
sir.
is 6 weeks infant brought to you for vaccination, and they can afford the combination vaccine. What advice you will give to the parents for as far as the IPV is concerned, or IPV containing combination?
So IPV containing combinations are better. There is no problem about that. It decreases the number of pricks. At the same time, number of visits are reduced, and combination vaccine are at par with standalone IPV. So it is better to give IPV in combination if they can afford.
So all 3 plus 1 plus 1.
3 plus 1 plus 1.
1, that is.
5 doses.
And if suppose the parents could not afford, they say, sorry, we do not have money then.
Then we can give pentavalent vaccine and a standalone IPV.
That is
also
one
can be
option.
given. But at the same time, we should tell them that the cost of rotavirus as well as pneumococcal is going to be needed, because this rotavirus and pneumococcal, the government people will not give if you take a pentavalent and IPV outside. So either you send it to the government for getting a fractional dose, or you can ask them to pay for the rotavirus as well as pneumococcal in the your clinic.
So you can refer them to the government setup for completion of the all vaccination if they cannot afford it. Or
Yes.
you can have an option of giving Pentavac plus standalone IPV.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but I think it will be crime to give them pentavalent without any IPV at your place and neither refer them to the government center.
No, sir. A
Because you don't know.
Pentavac plus
It happens
IPV.
many times. It
Yeah,
happens
yeah.
many times. Parents don't
Penta-
want to go. They can't afford. The pediatricians will say, okay, I'll give you only pentavalent, rota, and pneumo. And the child is left without any IPV.
It will be a crime not to give IPV.
So
That
at
is
least
for
give
sure.
the child a standalone IPV later. If not that time,
Absolutely.
somewhere he can afford whatever.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, we agree. Suppose the 4-month-old baby who has received 2 doses, fractional doses from the government setup, as now he has come to you. Now
Yes.
says subsequently I will continue the vaccination with Dr. Khadke. What advice will give as far as the IPV is concerned?
See, the 2 fractional doses are already given. They are sufficient for him to protect from paralytic polio. We require another 3rd dose, which is to be given as a booster dose. So we can give 1 IPV followed by a booster at 18 months and 5 years of age.
When you will give this?
8 weeks after this.
8 weeks after the second dose.
Yes, sir.
You cannot wait for the 9 months and give the dose as the government is giving the 3rd fractional dose.
That
So
I really know.
8 weeks onwards, anytime when the
Anytime
parents
we
are
can.
ready.
Or if
I
not,
may even tell the parent that as you did not take the primary with me and you took because you cannot afford or whatever reason. Now the government is going to give at 9 months the 3rd dose of IPV. You have an option to take 3rd dose as well there and come for the boosters with to me.
but we will continue to advise them boosters when
Of
government
course,
is not doing it.
100%.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Even if the government he has given 9 months 3rd dose fractional, I
So
would still
that
give him
question-
the 15 months.
So
and
that
the
question will come subsequently.
Okay.
A 5-month-old child who has never received any IPV, what kind of an advice you will give?
See, he must have been received OPV, na? Oral polio.
Yeah, he has received OPV.
He has received oral
Yeah,
polio.
yeah. But
So
he has
we
not
can-
received IPV.
So we can give 0, 2 and 6 months.
0, 2 and 6 months, or 0, 2 and then you give the booster.
Yeah, 0, 2 and then give the booster.
The
the
child is
booster
just 5
will-
months old.
Yes.
So you will give booster after giving 2 doses, 8 weeks
8
apart.
weeks, 8 weeks
Not
apart.
4 weeks
2
apart.
doses, 8 weeks apart.
Yeah. Now, when you have a standalone IPV available, Dr. Manish, Now, freely standalone vaccine IPV is available with you. A child who is 9 months old, who has received only one dose of fractional IPV at 6 weeks, what will be your advice? How many doses of IPV to this child and then boosters?
One full dose of IPV will be recommended, followed by the booster doses.
How many doses?
One full dose IPV.
One full, because we have now these studies which says that you can give 2 doses at 6 weeks and 9 months to get same effect. So we can give.
So give only one dose and
And then
give
ask for the
boosters.
boosters.
So I would say at least one dose.
At least one.
dose.
But sir, now why I said at least because the studies were not available that time. Now we have got the studies to support it. 2 fractional doses at 6 weeks and 9 months. Here you are giving a full dose of IPV at 9 months.
But you're correct. So at least one dose, I would
Yeah.
say, and then a booster in the 2nd and 5th year.
And suppose somebody has received 2 doses at 6 weeks and 14 weeks, and now he has come at 9 months.
Send him back to BMC.
Yeah, to take the fractional IPV.
No,
dose.
but he would like to continue with you in private practice.
So give him 3 doses. No, as a third dose. As
Give one more dose at 9 months and then followed by boosters.
Followed by 2 booster doses.
If he has not received any IPV and he has received only oral polio, this is a very common situation.
So you give 2 doses of full IPV 8 weeks apart and advise him the booster doses.
So now the question for Dr. Shah,
So,
sir, the
before
last
that,
one.
Sanjay, before that, a child who's come
Yeah.
at 9 months having received 2 fractional dose in the public health.
Yeah.
Remember, he has also received only 2 PCVs. The
Yeah,
third
yeah.
PCV also is due at 9 months.
Absolutely. PCV.
So you should not forget to give that. Otherwise, he's not well protected.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Sir, Dr. Shah, sir, the
Yes,
child who is at 4.5 years old, who has not received IPV,
correct.
what schedule we should suggest?
So for him, 2 doses of IPV 8 weeks apart are more than enough.
And nothing, no booster or
That's
nothing
it.
is there. So
That
2
is
doses
booster
are required.
only, because at 5 years anyway you are giving booster. Huh?
So 2 doses 8 weeks apart should be enough.
Absolutely.
Now, this is one more question for Dr. Khatke. 12 months old patient visits your OPD having received 3 fractional doses in government setup. Do you advise him the boosters at 18 months and 5 years? I think you
Yes.
have already answered.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We should give 18 months and 5 years booster dose.
I told you after listening to Dr. Nitin Shah, very few questions will be left to be. So still will recommend to take boosters at 18 months and 5 years.
5 years.
Absolutely. Dr. Manish, can you tell us in short the merits of OPV and IPV? What are the advantages and disadvantages in short?
Again, after listening to Nitin Shah, sir, I think the only 2 merits of OPV or IPV is easy to administer and they are cheap. Basically, the mucosal immunity is also, sir is saying it has been boosted by IPV and the contact immunity is also there with the IPV. And demerits, you can say the side effects of VAP and VDPV is there with the oral polio vaccine and which is not there obviously with the injectable polio.
So, though it's an excellent vaccine.
If you ask me, Sanjay,
Yeah.
the merits of OPV are already utilized.
Absolutely.
Now only
absolutely.
demerits are existing, and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have to face that vaccine. Earlier we do it, better the world will be.
Absolutely. So with the excellent vaccine which has helped us in eradicating 99% of the polio in this world. Unfortunately, when we stopped using, we have taken the advantage of OPV. Now we have realized there are disadvantages. And to most VAP and VDPV, the VAP is a risk to an individual or to an contact vaccine. And CDPV is a problem for the community because it has a potential to cause outbreak. So with these 2 major limitations in the use of oral polio, we'll further go and discuss what is VAP and VDPV.
So one more comment is that we always say that OPV did its wonderful job reducing 99.9% of disease and 99% of the countries. But it has come at the expense of thousands of children getting paralytic because of the delay in eradication. That we
Absolutely.
forget. If we had used IPV earlier, we would have eradicated much earlier.
The Scandinavian countries have already used only IPV and they have done exceptionally well.
USA and most of the Europes have controlled
Sir, but
paralytic polio at
this must-
coverage of less than 60 to 70%.
But this must have happened because of cutter incidents, sir.
No,
Qatar.
not Qatar. Qatar incident happened in
Because-
1960.
because of the Qatar incidents, nobody was really interested in getting an IPV at that time.
Sir, I mean, this is being recorded, so I cannot say something, but the government of India actually had a joint venture with French government for transfer of technology for IPV and Hib vaccine. Plant was made in Noida, which is the building is still existing. It was to start, but the permission was not at the end withdrawn. There occurred a public interest litigation in French court as to why this breach of contract. But there it was proven that we have no locus standi against another foreign country. So, there are many things which happen behind the curtain. I mean, I can understand that you have not one but two excellent vaccines, and IPV is so cost effective even in the private market as compared to pneumococcal, HPV, and so many other vaccines. And yet, all those vaccines are recommended left, right, and center. But IPV was always the stepchild of the eradication program, and I don't know why. It meets not the eyes of science, but much beyond.
Sir, one more question for you. The type 2 wild polio virus was eradicated in 1999 and
Right.
certified subsequently.
Hmm.
And still you need to maintain population immunity against type 2. Any particular reason for that, or we could have avoided?
Because the type 2 is the commonest CVDPV, 90% of CVDPV is type 2, and 40% of VAP is type 2. So even when the CVDPV is gone, I mean, the type 2 is gone from the polio vaccine, AMOPV2 is still there to fight the CVDP outbreak. So you're actually adding fuel to the fire to douse the fire.
But do you think that this CBDPV type 2 is basically a man-made phenomenon by using AMOPV2 for the mop-up rounds and all that?
Not
Otherwise,
only
from where
MOPV, MOPV or TOPV. Before
No, no.
TOPV was discontinued,
Yeah.
you had
See,
to
now-
have a very strong type 2 immunity by round of 2 IM IPV, which did not happen in most of the countries of Africa. In
Sir,
India,
no,
it happens. So India doesn't
my-
have CVDPV, but
So,
Africa.
sir, my question is little different.
Hmm.
In 2016, we have stopped using trivalent and we have switched it to bivalent.
Correct.
So the risk initially of say CBDPV was for 2 years.
No,
For
but that is in
mathematical 5 years.
no, but that is in an area where there is good immunity against type 2 and good immunization coverage. Both of them were not existing in Africa. That's why you see most of the CVDPV outbreaks are in Africa, not in Asia or India.
So from where this CBDPV type 2 is still coming?
Because they had suboptimal coverage of the vaccination, routine immunization, and pulse follow immunization. Several children did not have immunity against any type, and when they withdrew type 2 from the TOPV and switched to BOP without an IM coverage, the type 2 immunity was lacking. Now there will be type 2 vaccine virus circulating here and there in the last few years. Now that is perpetuating.
So it will continue beyond 5 years also.
It will continue beyond 5 years. That is the eye opener.
Okay.
Yes.
So because if I see the July 2023 report,
Yes.
the
168
cases of
cases.
and no CVPD for type 3.
Yeah, type 3 is anyway rare. Type 1 and type 2 only can happen. Type 1 is the least. I mean, type 3 is the least. Type 1 to some extent, type 2 maximum.
So
when we-
CBDPV2 can continue beyond 5 years. That is the
Unless you
take-home
stop MOPV2 to douse the fire.
message.
So now
when-
instead of MOPV, they have novel
Novel
NOPV2.
OPV2. Yeah.
NOPV2 has 5 mutation in the areas where it can lead to neurovirulence and chances of outbreak. And NOPV2 now is made by only one manufacturer, but more than 600 million doses have been used. And except for some anecdotal reports of neurovirulence, there have been no CVDP cases because of NOPV. So I think that is the saving grace. The other saving grace is that you switch to completely stop OPV and switch to only IPV. And the third is to use adjuvanted IPV.
Yeah.
Adjuvanted IPV, you need only 0.1 cc instead of 0.5 ml. So
With
that's coming in
aluminum-
a big way.
With aluminum hydroxide as an
Absolutely.
adjuvant.
Yes.
So you have answered my second question, which was already on the
Sorry.
screen.
No, your screen is not, I think your screen is not moved.
No, because it was a part 2 of the same slide.
Okay.
Dr. Khadge, what is VAP and what is the importance of this and what are the
See,
problems with the VAP?
VAP is VAP.
The
is
second
basically-
question also you can take. Why it is
Okay, sir.
common? Yeah.
VAP is basically vaccine-associated paralytic poliomyelitis, and it is basically with the oral polio vaccine, and almost 3 to 4 million doses of polio vaccine which are being given. There is a loss of attenuation of this oral polio, and which goes as a wild and causes a polio in the contact or this person who has received polio virus.
So
So that-
Sanjay,
Yeah.
just to bring to your notice,
Yeah.
in 2005, when I was president, there were 66 cases of wild polio in the country, and there were 65 cases of VAP. In 2010, there were 42 wild polio. In 2011, 1. And 2012, almost none case of wild polio. And yet we continue to have at least 60 cases of VAP every year in India. Now, it's an ethical dilemma. That can you continue to use a vaccine which itself is to paralysis, and it is used for a disease which itself is not existing?
Sir, can a person where there is an outbreak of CVDPV can have a VAP-like situation?
Yes. No.
Dr. Shah,
No, what is the question?
suppose
CVD.
there is a CVDPV
Yes.
and it is circulating. Can it cause VAP also to an individual who
No,
has
so that
exposed?
it leads to CVDP, because when you say VAP or CVDPV, it is based on the virus which is grown in the stool of that child, which is sequence. Whether its analog is more towards wild, then it is VAP. Its analog is more towards circulating derived virus, then it is CVDPV.
Okay.
It's a matter of laboratory testing which will classify into VAP or CVDPV.
Sir, my
Like
question.
the wild virus, the VAP cases, they are less than 1% difference in the genetic structure, whereas for CVDPV is almost 6 to 8%.
Sir, why the VAP is classified as non-polio AFP?
Not to create scare in the community.
Oh,
It
so
is-
it has no
it is-
scientific explanation.
It is hushing
Oh,
under
actually,
the,
this is just to
hushing under the carpet.
Okay. Because I was surprised in polio-like thing, and it is called as non-polio AFP.
So VAP, if you have sent a patient's stool for AFP, and if it grows a vaccine-derived poliovirus or a wild virus, the report is given as CVDPV or wild polio. If it is VAP, it is not given. But you can talk to the laboratory. If you have an immune compromised host, then they will on an individual basis tell you that it was VAP. But they won't give you the figures of the national level, how many cases happen in which year, etc. Like just to give an example, we had a patient under Dr. Rajesh Udani at Hinduja. The child used to come from Surat. He used to have paralysis, and then he would recover, and then he would go back. And then after a few months, again he'll come back. He had paralysis, again he would recover. So we're wondering what is this type of paralysis, like a infantile hemiplegia, but it's not hemiplegia. It is haphazard paralysis. So his stool was sent as an AFP, and actually showed a case of VAP. And then we did the workup. His immunoglobulins were low. He was a B cell deficiency. And he went and sued the Surat municipality.
Dr. Manish, why do you think that, why are we not getting VAP even after giving 0 polio dose? You have already answered, but you can repeat.
Because they are giving the zero polio dose when there is very high maternal antibodies, which
So that is protecting, absolutely.
This doesn't lead to VAP.
What are the different types of VDPVs and what is the significance of persistent VDPV? Dr. Rajendra?
See, VDP is basically vaccine-derived poliovirus, which has a more than 1% genetic mutation in your poliovirus drops. So basically, there is more than 1% mutation, and there is a new virus which has been developed, which causes vaccine-derived poliovirus. There are 3 different types of VDPV. One is circulating VDPV, second is a immunodeficient VDPV, and third is ambiguous VDPV. The persistent VDPV is basically when you have a VDPV more than 6 months of same group in same area, then we call it as a persistent VDPV, and it is usually a programmatic error.
Has the definition changed to more than 2 months for the persistent VDPV? Sir, because recent the purple book says even for 2 months, if the gap is more than 2 months and you identified the CVDPV in 2 different areas, not from the same household, you can still call it as an persistent, and then this is an programmatic error.
It's a semantic of the definition. The basic idea is that once you have even one case of AVDPV, you have to be alert that there is some problem. That means the type 2 immunity in the children's gut is not as good as you would want in that area.
So as a treatment part, they start doing the mop-up round for say 2 doses of MOPV 4 to 6 weeks apart.
So in India, they did a different thing in Hyderabad when they had a CVDPV. There was almost 4-5 years back, they actually did a mop-up run in IPV. I think that was a great idea because that did not lead to the, as you were saying, you're not adding fuel to the fire. You're adding actually extinguisher to the fire. And
But
then
actually
after
the
that, no more.
Usually
CBDP
we
happened.
avoid giving
Usually-
injections in case of suspected
Doesn't
polio.
matter. They
Sir-
did a mop-up round with IMIPV.
Sir, but government always do a mop-up round with oral polio vaccine,
Yeah.
that too MOPV, and highly intensified
Yes, but
In the
that's
same
for
unit.
CVDPV.
CVDP.
But only one outbreak happened at Hyderabad. At that time, they used IPV.
But that is going to seed more add fuel to the fire, sir.
No, it didn't. Because IPV doesn't lead to any further live vaccine.
No,
No,
virus.
no, no.
Not
He's
IPV.
talking about the MOPV giving us a mop-up round.
Mop-up rounds.
It is.
MOPV.
That's what I said. Na? When Sanjay asked as to why these African countries continue to have even for 10, 15 years is because the MOPV is adding fuel to the fire.
Yes, sir.
But that's why they brought now novel OPV, NOPV.
So this question is for you, sir. If the induction of active immunity either by vaccine or by natural infection measured by antibody titers, protection against paralytic polio is lifelong.
Unless you are
Why?
immune compromised.
Yeah, an immunocompetent person. Why
Yes.
are we giving boosters to these patients?
As I said, to maintain good immunity longer time, because number one, we don't know whether over 30, 40 years immunity may drop and whether you can become a victim of a paralysis because of wild or vaccine virus. But I think more than that, if there's an outbreak in the community, you should not become a part of chain of transmission.
So it is more of a
But-
chain of transmission, or whether it is
More-
of individual protection.
More of
Because
chain of
individual
transmission.
protection is achieved by only 2 doses also.
Yeah, that 2 doses is only for short term, not for long term. I'm talking long term.
No,
Lifelong.
paralytic polio.
Yeah, paralytic polio also. We don't know. Those cases of paralytic polio that happened in Namibia, Tajikistan, no one saw whether how many of them were completely unimmunized. Very few must be completely unimmunized. Yet, so many cases happen. 400 cases is not a small amount.
Sir, if we take case of ourselves, we have received polio way back, say 40, 50 years back.
Yes.
How many cases of adult polio we have seen in our country?
There was one case of polio in above 16 years of age before we eradicated polio.
Now because
Now we
have
don't
not,
know. We don't get data. Now there are no polio. No? Then we don't have wild polio or paralytic polio or CVDP except VAP. VAP happens only in children because only children below 5 years are given OPV. No? We are lucky to get scot-free, Dr. Sanjay.
No, sir, this is just the scientific discussion, nothing personal.
Yes, so we are lucky to get scot-free that we, maybe I think because we had a very high level of community immunity with pulsing before 2016 switch happened. So, you know, when I was the president, there was one pulse polio round every 3 weeks in UP.
Yeah.
So there were 9 rounds in 6 months. So that type of immunity, no virus can sustain.
Some 16 doses were given in the span of say 1.5 months.
Yes, yes.
Just for the audience, Dr. Khadge, can you again say why ACVIP has strongly recommended IPV dose at 5 years? The rationality behind it.
See, the rationality behind is basically to block the transmission. Because if you have received 3 doses of IPV, you are protected from paralytic polio as an individual. And then basically, if transmission has to be avoided, there is always a risk of importation from Pakistan, Afghanistan. They are our near and dear ones. So you can get the, if your antibody titers fall down and you get a wild polio virus imported, then you have polio disease.
So does that mean that the 5th year dose is a social contribution from an individual and not for himself? This cannot be the theory. Dr. Nitin Shah, sir?
No, it is required for long-term protection. Not only
Yes.
5 years, even second decade IPV is given by many countries. Is not for no reason. It's for the reason that you need to have good immunity. And talking about the bioterrorism, people may laugh, but there was actually an attempt done in India. There was a type 2 wild virus, which had actually ceased to exist in 1990, right? It was found in the sewage, and they did a reverse tracing, and it was found to come from a lab. There was and then in the lab, when they found the vaccine vials, one of the vaccine vial actually had live type 2 wild virus. So someone played a mischief. Either bioterrorism, mistake, God knows what happened. This is what I heard from Dr. Jacob John in one of the lectures.
So we have to protect every individual from this bioterrorism also.
Yes.
Sir, do you think that we'll have an IPV at 10 years along with TDAP?
I am strongly in favor of that. I am asking all the manufacturers to do a quick zero prevalence study. Maybe if the ethical permission is given, I don't mind one of my DNB students doing it and prove that many of us have lost antibodies to type 1, type 2, type 3, or all the three. That will make a very strong case for them to bring Tdap IPV. They will have to quickly do a zero efficacy or whatever, zero convergent study in some 200 subjects, and they'll get the license. Not that difficult.
Sir, with the eradication of type 2, we have switched to bivalent. Now with eradication of type 3, should we move to monovalent OPV?
Very
One.
strong.
Before we call it as in-game polio is over and there
Let
is no
us-
polio, should we switch
us-
over to monovalent OPV1?
Let us switch to only IPV.
Ah,
Now you have a wholesale based IPV. Instead of penta, just make it hexa. That's it.
that can be given.
Yeah, and like you see the HPV from serum, which is today a single dose cost around 2,000 or plus something. But the public health, Mr. Cyrus Poonawalla is on the record saying he will give for 250 rupees. Same way, if the hexa comes in the national program, today hexa is available, maybe available at whatever 1,000, 1,200 rupees. It may be available at 200-300 rupees. I'm sure government can afford. It will make the logistics, transporting, storage, so many things so easy. And you know, the intradermal, then to train the people to give intradermal, you know, it's not an easy thing.
Sir, can I give IPV after 6 years of age when it is not recommended? So medico-legally, I'm safe if somebody has not received IPV before at 5 years and now he has come at 8 years of age.
We give it to our transplant patients.
No, otherwise in an
We give it to Hajj pilgrimage patients who are going there. They can take people who are going to African country where there is polio outbreak. You can give IPV or OPV. People take IPV, no harm. So it's an off-label. It's not contraindicated. You have to document why you're giving. Take the consent if possible.
And then give.
Yeah.
But medico-legally, there is nothing wrong in giving.
Nothing wrong. There's medico-legally. And you use sildenafil for primary pulmonary hypertension, right? It's not licensed.
Correct.
It's life-saving.
We give Menectra or say MCQ like vaccines. Do you recommend that one dose of IPV should be given for all those students who are going abroad for the studies?
Not at all.
Not recommended.
That is too much commercialization.
This question we have already discussed. I think
So there was just go back. There was one in between the two. You have all IPV, you have all OPV. You had a sequential schedule.
Yeah.
Whereby you give one IPV and then you give subsequent OPV. So there's no VAP and there's boosting. So that was a good idea before you switch to complete IPV schedule.
You can go to OPV followed by IPV.
0, 6 months and 9 months oral polio.
Yes.
And IPV at 1.5 months, 2.5 months, and 3.5 months.
No, not even that much, sir. They used to give only one IPV at 2 months, followed by 2 OPV at 4 months and 6 months.
Sequential schedule.
Sequential.
Yeah.
I think no panel can be completed unless we discuss VVM, especially if you are talking about the IPV and OPV. I would like to have Dr. Khadke to speak about what is VVM and its importance.
See, basically it is a vaccine vial monitor, which is there on the vial, and it has a blue background and a white center.
Square.
White square. And according to the basically all of us know that basically it is a heat sensitive as well as light sensitive vaccine. So if it is exposed for many days to heat sensitivity or light sensitivity, it changes its color. And once it becomes totally blue, center square becomes totally blue, it is of no use to use in the patients. So stage 1 and stage 2 can be used, but stage 3 and stage 4 should not be used as far as the VVM of oral polio vaccine goes.
It tells you the cumulative heat exposure to a vaccine and tells you at what time it should be discarded. So everyone who is practicing and giving OPV must see first the VVM before giving the OPV.
Similarly, there is an effect of repeated thawing of OPV.
Yeah.
So if you have more than 10 times repeated thawing of OPV, then you should avoid more than 10 times thawing of OPV.
Yeah. So it is strongly recommended to follow the VVM before giving a polio drops to an individual. Another thing in this VVM, sometimes it's written VVM 2, VVM 7, VVM 30. What does that mean?
There are different VVMs for different vaccines. So all are not heat sensitive, all are not light sensitive. So duration as well as heat sensitivity, light sensitivity or cold sensitivity. Depending upon that, there is a VVM for each and every vaccine, which gives you duration of use of that vaccine for that much period. So if you have,
I think
So
VVM
Sanjay, if I can add to it,
7 or
that
13 says the number of days if the vaccine is exposed to the temperature at 37 degrees will be discarded after that particular number of days.
particular number of
So
days.
the vaccine which is highly heat sensitive will have VVM 2,
Yes.
and the vaccine which is relatively less heat sensitive will have VVM 30 or even VVM 256 has also come.
Yes.
And that is the importance of that VVM 2, 7, 14 or something. Sir, anything, sir, you would like to add?
no. So there are VVM 2, 7, 14, 30 and VVM 250. And just to give an
250,
example,
yeah.
polio and rotavac are VVM 2, whereas rotacil is given VVM 30, but is actually VVM 250. It means for 250 days, it's stable
You
at
can
37
keep at
degrees.
37 degrees.
Yes.
And what reaction is taking place is an monomer is getting polymerized to polymer, and the color is changing from the white
Correct.
to dark
Correct.
gray
But
color.
I always say people that it's also a surrogate for other vaccines. So suppose your fridge was off
Very
for
true,
some time,
very true,
then
yeah.
you first check your VVM. If that has
Absolutely.
changed color, you know there is a cumulative exposure to more than 2 days of 37 degree. So the
Absolutely.
most heat sensitive vaccines have to be thrown away, and the remaining should be used first. Don't throw them
Very.
away, but use them first.
So for take-home message for all of us, if the color of the inner square is the same color or darker than the outer circle, it indicates that vaccine has been exposed too much, that heat should, and this should be discarded.
Correct.
So most probably the last question, Dr. Khadke, what are the novel approaches in polio vaccines which have come recently, which will help in managing the situation better to have lesser and lesser complications?
So we have the first is basically novel OPV, NOPV, which would reduce the VAP as well as VDPV. Second is use of IPV, having a third dose of IPV in national immunization schedule, and giving 5 doses of IPV in private practice. All these will be a novel approach to protect the children from polio.
Can you talk about the SIPV,
SIPV and the adjuvanted IPV.
adjuvanted IPV?
SIPV basically can be produced in a mass scale, so it requires a less biosafety. So that is also good novel approach.
Adjuvanted IPV already we have discussed.
Yes, adjuvanted we already discussed. Yes,
So
sir.
these are few novel approaches where this disease can be tackled better. With all these things, I thank you all for the wonderful panel discussion. I think I'm sure all the questions related to polio, its eradication, in-game polio program, it's very clearly discussed, and take-home messages has been given by all the 3 panelists. I'm thankful to all the panelists for your active discussion and contribution in this. Thank you so much.
Jitu has raised his hand. Jitu has raised his hand. I don't know why. Jitu, unmute. What do you want to say?
Good evening, sir. Sir, for countries like neighboring countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan or Ethiopian countries, certificate of OPV is must for visa.
Or IPV, OP or IPV.
It is not slash IPV, sir. Only
No,
OPV.
you can take IPV. Haj pilgrimage,
Okay.
at least you can take IPV. I'm sure the same is true for
Because
them.
I am afraid of taking OPV now.
No, so you take IPV. No. Only thing is, I don't know, for yellow fever certification as per the WHO prescription. But I think for OPV, individual practitioners can give. That is what my gut feeling is.
Because in the chat box, I could not see the question. Somebody has asked, I do not understand the question. He says, is there any incidence of paralysis like illness in human children due to zoonotic transmission of polio-like viruses? Will these vaccines help to have cross immunity?
No, so you have paralysis caused like polio because of other enteroviruses. It's not zoonotic, they are human. So they are echo, entero, other viruses. They are taken as non-polio. There is no way you can prevent them.
Rest of the people have given, they have only given their MMC number to get that one credit point, but no questions. So I think I will hand over mic to Dr. Amol for the further proceedings. Thank you so much once again. Dr. Kasi sir, would you like to add something, sir? Kasi sir is there?
Is still there? I don't know. Might have
He
left.
He was there, but right now not.
I think he's left. Huh?
He has left.
Dr.
So,
Amol.
So thank you all panelists. Thank you is a very small word because of as you have taken lot of effort and almost 2 hours we are in to this session. One question is there. Dr. Jain Shah has asked. 1 minute, sir. Should an adult with autoimmune disease on immunosuppressants take IPV?
Yes.
No, not required. Unless he's a transplant recipient, it's not required.
Unless he is transplant recipient.
And Dr. Ashish Gupta has asked, can't we change schedule for all primary vaccines 2 for 6 months for DPT, Hep and hepatitis B plus IPV?
The only problem is your good class patient is staying in an area where there's also a neighborhood which is having a slums-like area,
Slums
and
area, yeah.
workers coming to your home in and out. They may bring diseases which are prevalent. So I would still not do it. I would at the most do 2, 3, 4, but not 2, 4, 6.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, this third fractional IPV in government, should they have thought of keeping at 1.5 years rather than 9 months, because there is too much overcrowding at 9 months now.
No, 9 months is
The
only
gap-
MR vaccine for them
Yeah,
and
yeah.
JE.
No, sir, now pneumococcal also.
Yeah, so that's
So
okay.
it's an advantage of giving one more dose.
Give all 4. Chalo, time to sleep.
Thank you,
you.
Nitin.
Sir, can I
Thank you.
officially, in private practice, can I officially tell the person or the patient whom I have given 3 doses of IPV not to take OPV in pulse polio program?
No, pulse polio you must encourage, because any number of OPV after you have taken 3 IPV are no problem at all for safety, but it will help him to have some gut immunity and not become part of chain of transmission. So it's a disservice if you do that. Don't do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. And thank you all delegates also. RD sir, do you want to comment anything?
No, Amol. What can I comment? It was so enriching and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
It was sheer pleasure. Thank you for
Thank you
inviting
all
us.
once
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you for the opportunity and thank you panelists for the wonderful discussion, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
you, sir.
moderator. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Bye bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.